welcome to this week's online lectures on Introduction to English Language, Introduction to Linguistics and Phonetics. My name is Daphne Uduneje. I guess this should be the second class for this course. So if you're just joining us, you may have to align with students so that you could get some of the things that we have done in our past classes. We have looked at what linguistics is, types of linguistics. We have talked about the basic kinds of linguistics, the use of linguistics in various fields. And then we also talked about language. What is language? The differences between animal language and animal communication and human communication. We were able to bring out the fact that animals do not have language. They do communicate, but they do not have language. And we're able to get the details on that from use theory. Use theory, which talked about the 5 characteristics of human language. The 5 characteristics of human language, which was that language is productive. First of all, we said language is has the quality or the characteristics of displacement. We talked about language arbitrariness. We talked about the productivity of language. We talked about cultural transmission. I guess that was where we stopped. Talked about the fact that human beings does not have an innate ability to transfer their language to their children. The assumption is that there's no genetic components. There's no inherent ability by human beings to transfer their language to their children, unlike animals. Rather, it is said that the children of human beings or human beings acquire language. They acquire language, that is to say, language is exposed to children. I'll give you an example. Now, if a child, at a certain age, if a child is born to, let's say, a Yoruba parents, since we're Nigerians, to know Yoruba parents, and that child, with the parents move possibly, let's say, to Edo State, for instance, and over there in Edo State, the parents possibly did not take time to expose the child to their language, which is the Yoruba language. There's every tendency that that child will do what is going to pick up the Edo dialect that is spoken. Why? Because he's going to mix up with the children over there who speaks that dialect. Is going to pick that language from them or that dialect from them. Why? Because he was exposed to that language by the student that he interacted with. Why possibly the parents did not expose their native language to him? I give you another example. If a child is born to Korean parents, all right, and now maybe they are adopted by French parents in France, the child possibly will grow up speaking the French language. Why? Because that is the language he has been exposed to. But that child can only speak the French language if that child has been exposed, if the parents deliberately now expose the child to Korean language. But this, again, is different. Animals don't seem to pass the ability to communicate on to their offspring genetically. For instance, dogs bark. Once a dog gets to the age of barking, it begins to bark. Okay? Once a cockerel gets to the age of crowing, it begins to crow. For instance, some of you that possibly lived close to the rural areas, or you have some settings where they keep some of this, domestic animals, you would have noticed that certain animals, like a cockerel now, when it gets to the age of crowing, once it gets to that age, he doesn't have to hear, his parents. Now the bigger cockerel now crow, no. But there is an inherent ability in that dog, in that cock to crow. There is an inherent ability in dogs to bark. Wherever you take the dog to, wherever in the world, once that dog gets to the age of barking, he begins to bark. But that is not, it's not the same with human, and that is why you see children brought up in Lagos there. Mostly, most of us from the southeast, we have, with the standard quality. You see most children born to Benin parents, born to Igbo parents, born to Akwa Ibom parents here in Lagos. I live in Lagos here, so I use most of my examples from here. You discover that those children sometimes don't speak their dialects. Okay? Rather, they will either speak, most of them speak the Yoruba language. So you discover that children born to Igbo parents, most times when they're at home, they speak the Yoruba language. Same with children born to, the Akwa Ibom, the Benin parents. So why is it that way? Just because of what I've explained to you. Those parents possibly did not expose their children to their dialects. And because language can be learned through exposure, through acquisition, once those children get to school, from the primary school to the secondary school, they are first of all exposed to the English language at school. And of course, when they play around in the community, and all of that, they get exposed to the language of the community in which they live. So for those children who live in Lagos, they acquire the Yoruba language. They seem to speak more of that language than their dialect. And this is just the simple reason why it happens that way. Now we said language have double articulation. Language has double articulation. And that is because there are two separate layers of language working together to provide us with a tool of sounds which can be combined to communicate with one another. On the one hand, we have a limited number of discrete sounds. Example, the 44 phonemes in English, which in isolation have no inherent meaning. Okay, the 44 phonemes, there are 44 of them, and for you to get to understand this course proper within the limited time we have, you have to get to know these phonemes. We have 26 English alphabets, but when it comes to phonetics, we have 44. I'll be exposing you to some of them in the course of this class, or possibly by the next time, because it's like we've missed a lot. And what I'm trying to do, I want to give you a grounding in linguistics before we can actually move to the sounds of English. And then there's an assignment I have for you today, which will help you, those of you that will take time to do that assignment, it will help you in learning the sounds easily. Like I said at the beginning of this course, the English language, or language generally, is a social science. And so that means we should have a language laboratory. But thank God today it is easier. Maybe when my sets went to school those days. We needed all of that. But thank God we have the internet. So any student that is up and doing with the internet, you can learn as much as you should. So having said that, before I forget, let me pause here before we continue and give you an assignment that will help you to acquire, to learn the sounds of the English language comfortably. If we don't do this, it's going to you'll find it difficult because some of you possibly did not go to schools where the study of phonetics was made was very obvious, or let's say compulsory, if I can use that word. So as a result of that, possibly you have done some other aspects of English, and maybe you didn't know this. So to help you out, I'll suggest that please take down this assignment. Now, I want you to download an app. It's called the Sounds of English. The Sounds of English. Now, when you download that app, you're going to do the following. Let me help you. You'll see when you download the app, when you open it, you're going to see practice, read, write, and listen. So there are the different segments that will be, that will pop up on your screen. So you go to listen. So when you go to listen, you will see a table of the 44 phonemes in English language. So the phonemes of 44 table, that's where you're supposed to start from. So with that, you're going to practice it on your own. So there we have the 44 phonemes. We can't do all of that, within the limited time we have. But when you download that, that's your assignment this week. Every day, you try and learn, go over it. As you press the different buttons, the sounds pops up. And then if you go back to where we have bridge, now what bridge will do for you is when you click next, you'll be given the sound of that word. I'll try and see if I can download it next week so that we can practice, but just that we don't have all of that time. So you do well to study it, to do this on your own. So when you get back, you see the read. So that of read in that app, you see by your left hand, you see show, another one is next. So once you touch the next button, it will bring up a word, and the app will pronounce that word for you. Now that's one way that you're going to learn the sounds fast. And of course, we have the one of read too. So this app in particular, and of course there are some other apps. There's one of the British Council. Please take this very serious. That's the only way you can learn the sounds of English. It's more of a practical thing. So I also suggest you download that of the British Council. The British Council has an app, okay, that helps you to teach you the traditional way of pronouncing the English language. Now, the English language, majorly we have the American English, then we have the British English. Of course, we have the British, where are colonial masters. So the British English is the standard English for us. And of course, the work over the British English is also the standard English, because the English language is the language of the Englishman. And it is the language, the Englishman, the British are the owners of the English language. Of course, we get to know more about this when we do, hopefully, if we're able to get there. I think we should have like 2 more slots. So if we'll be able to do those 2 slots, then you get to know how the English became the British are the owners of the English language. Now, to assignment number 2, do a research. Do a research on the historical linguistics and the history of the English language. I'll take that again. do a research on historical linguistics and the history of English language. I hope you've gotten that. So we can move ahead with talking about language. So I did say that language has it has dual articulation, and that's what brought us to the phonemes, the 44 phonemes in the English language. And now I'll give you an example of that. The phonemes, the 44 phonemes of English in isolation have no inherent meaning. An example of it is the word but. That is B, if you will, then E, and then the word sorry, I couldn't show this particular script. I have it here, but what I'll do is that by next week, or like I've always suggested, if you send me your email so that I can send you the soft copy. But by next week, we're going to run through this particular topic that I'm teaching you now. Now here we have the verb, the A and the N. So together that is the B-I-N. On the other hand, the B, the I, and the N has no meaning of their own. Now we have a virtually unlimited number of distinct meanings which you can create by combining these sounds in certain ways. Now when the sounds are combined in certain ways, they now make meaning. For instance, example, being, or need, Now various other combinations such as B and I are not meaningful in English, but could possibly be in other languages. So that is what we mean by saying language has duality. Okay, it has double articulation. Then of course we talk about other features of language, which has to do with reflexiveness, which means that we are able to use the language to talk about language. This is typically linguistic. Is discrete, which is typically what linguists do. Discreteness is also something that is said to distinguish human languages from other forms of animal communication. Please note this, we keep saying animal communication. Other animals do not have language, but they rather communicate. The dog barks, the cock crows, the cat meows, and all of that. They have the different ways of communicating meaning, to their species. But language, again, is one of the distinctive characteristics which is only related to human beings. Now, it means that we have said that distinctness is also something that is said to distinguish human language from other forms of animal communication. Now, what this means is that the sounds of a language differ sufficiently from one another for a native speaker to distinguish them and thereby know which sign with which meaning is being used at any one time. Okay, so there's this distinctness about language, and it distinguishes one language from the other. Now again, we said that language is connected to the brain. Okay, language is connected to the brain. So what is this? We said language is a cognitive skill, and one therefore whose roots are situated in the evolution of the brain. Okay, it is cognitive, so it's attached to the evolution of the brain. Now we do not exactly know when our ancestors began to speak. If you read a little about evolution, it talked about when human beings were evolving from one species, from one kind of creature to the other, and when they finally became human beings, and then they started speaking the one form of language or the other. But according to history, we have about 30,000 to 100,000 years ago. Okay, it is said that human beings began to speak language between 30,000 to 100,000 years ago. And okay, well, this is just an estimate. Now, when ancestor or when but the truth is that once they started speaking the language, it began. And from then, we have different kinds of languages. We have about 5,000 to 6,000 languages existing in the world today. So, and as we will learn, possibly toward the end of this course, some of them evolved, from one to the other, and one other, some were borrowed, okay, some were transliteration that's listed from some other language and giving a different, meaning entirely. So, but now research on language have been able to show that there are two major areas of the brain specialized in language processing, production, and comprehension. Now, this is the Broca's and the Winnicot's area. The Broca's and the Winnicot's area. Now, please don't be surprised that it's like we're talking more of biology, here. That is because, like I said when we started, language primarily, like we're going to learn when we get to the organs of speech. The organs of speech, yes, the primary function, it has its biological function, which is the primary function of breathing, eating, and all of that. But then the function of sound or speech was superimposed on the organs of speech. And that is why we talk about the brain. In our next class, we'll be talking more about the organs of speech. Okay, we'll be looking at. I'll be showing you on the screen the different organs or parts of speech, which, like I said, the different organs, biological organs, which are used for different functions that are now also seen as organs of speech aside the other functions they do. So, so that is it. So the Broca's and the Winnicot's area are responsible for language, and most of the languages that we speak today are an offshoot of that. Now, I'm going to take you to, please, I hope you understood so far all that we talked about language, and we're moving now to phonetics and phonology. And please don't forget that, like I said, you will not enjoy the next class if you didn't take time to do the assignment I have asked you to do. Okay, it will be sounding like Greek to you, but I want to give you a soft landing back ahead. So some of you complain, why give you assignments that you have not been giving lectures on? Please, this is a higher institution. As much as possible, yes, we're instructors, but you must do your part. Okay, you must do your part. So for the next 15 minutes or thereabouts, I'm going to introduce you to the sounds of the English language, but as much as possible, you may not get it all. It will not be easy with you, except to do that assignment. So I wouldn't go deeply into the sounds until next week, when I would assume that you would have all done the assignment. And of course, for the second assignment, I expect you to submit to me. So my email, daphneudunede@gmail.com. Daphne, just the spelling of my name at Gmail. Please, some of you still send your assignments to my Yahoo mail. I prefer it so that I can keep a perfect record, because we're supposed to submit these assignments, your scores, to the school. So please, the second one, the assignment on historical linguistics, do submit to my email. Now, phonetics and phonology. Now, the two primary linguistics disciplines concerned with speech sounds, those sounds that are used by humans to communicate, are phonetics and phonology. Both areas are mutually dependent, okay? Phonetics describe the concrete physical form of sounds, how they are produced, heard, and how they can be described. While phonology is concerned with the function of sounds, that is, with their status and inventory in any given language. All right. Now, phones and phonetics. The two basic types of phonetics are the transcription and the classification of sounds. I'll take that again. The two basic tasks of phonetics are the transcription and the classification of sounds, also called phones. Phones. Sounds are also called phones within this context. Now, the phone is therefore the basic unit of phonetics, and it refers to the concrete sound substance as such. Now, in the area of articulatory phonetics, this substance is described on the basis of the articulatory properties. Okay, note that articulative properties. Now, let me also help you out here. Now, phonetics is a specialized kind of teaching. Okay, it has its own jargons, and I know you'll be very, very familiar with what I mean by jargon. In your use of English, we were told that the English language has basic two major, categories. We talked about the common core words, and we talked about the registers. Now we're talking about the registers. So the linguistics has its own registers. So there's nothing we can do about it. There are no two words about it. You have to get used with the registers. Okay, I'm going to help you. By next class, I'll send you all that we have done. So you should, and of course, if you go on the net, all right, if you go on the net, you become familiar with some of these terms. Those are the terms. This is the language of phonetics. We can't speak any other language. So when your teacher when you did your use of English in your various centers, you would have been told that we have registers of the language. Register has to do with professions, okay? We talked about the architects, the lawyers, the pilots, okay? In aviation, we have the language. Journalism has its own terms, okay? The engineers have their terms. So now in linguistics, we also have our own terms. So that's why you'll be hearing things like articulatory linguistics, auditory phonetics, and all of that, transcription. And you're going to hear more as we continue. Now, in the area of articulatory phonetics, this substance is described on the basis of articulatory properties. These refer to the human vocal tract or to the speech organs. It is illustrated here in but I don't know, it's not showing on the screen. So you pardon me, I'm going to bring that up next week. And I also suggest that you please go to the internet, look for the speech organs or organs of the speech. Please, you go to the internet. We're coming back to this topic next week because we're going to dwell much on the sounding, and there's no way we can do that without the organs of speech, or it is called the speech chain. In various, if you go to the net, there are various topics on it. So it is called the speech chain. So also add that to your assignment. Go study the speech chains. Know the different parts that there are, because those are the organs that will be interacting, okay, to produce the various sounds that we're going to be sounding by in the next class. Okay. Now, phones are represented by placing brackets around the transcription. Okay, we place brackets around transcriptions. So, like in dance and dance, dance and dance. So dance, and then these are the different ways of pronouncing. One, dance is the British pronunciation, while dance is the American English or American pronunciation. Okay, now the usefulness of a transcription system or a phonetic alphabet is particularly possible in a language such as English, where pronunciation and spelling often diverge substantially. So what does this mean? The spelling of the English language differs from the pronunciation. So these are the basic things that you must get straight, please. All right. Now, if you're asked to transcribe C and C, you can see that in terms of the pronunciation or even the writing now, the spelling, in terms of the alphabet, the spelling is different from transcription. So I would also want you to do a study on this. The difference between the spelling and transcription. There's a lot of difference. And that is what I'll be showing you by next week. You see that the way words are spelled is not the way they are transcribed. So as a learner, okay, of the English language, except those of you that went to schools where, this was emphasized, okay, you may have to do a little more work on your own. You have to work very, very hard. And then for now, you have to make do with the internet. So I still suggest you go to the net. There are different packages that you could download. Yes, you have to spend your data. Students sometimes complain of data, but nothing good comes easy, please. So if you can be on the Facebook, on Twitter, so you can save all of that data and save it for your phonetic classes. All right, so when you go to the internet, download the various apps that will help you study the transcription table. Of course, if you download the sounds, the one I told you about, the pronunciation app, you will have the table. There are 44 in all. And then as you press each app, the phonetics master will give you the sound. And that will give you a good background for our next class. Now, we said there are various transcription models also. Now, there are so many ways of transcribing the English language. That's why we say we have so many models. But for me to say that the most authentic when it comes to British English is Daniel Jones. Okay, the original model of the phonetician. Daniel Jones is a phonetician. Okay, so we have two books written by him. We have introduction to the pronunciation of the sounds of the English language. That is a must do for you. So you could go to the net and look for it, download it. There you get all of this that we're talking about. So the most authentic of the transcription is the IPA, which is from the original phonetician, the Daniel Jones transcription. We have a few more minutes to go. So let me quickly introduce you to the classification of sounds. The classification of sounds. Let me remind you once more, please don't forget to download the apps, download the parts, the organs of speech, or it is called the speech chain. They are all on the net. That is how you will be very, very relaxed in the next class. So if you don't do these assignments ahead, you will not be comfortable with the next topic, which were majorly on the sound. So what I'll just be doing in the next class is just sounding, just making the sounds. Okay, so I want you to get familiar with it. So that's why I'm emphasizing on that. Now, sound classification of sounds. Traditionally, sounds are classified into consonants and vowels. Consonants are sounds that are produced with a major obstruction in the mouth cavity. For example, in the case of there is direct contact between the tip of the tongue, which is the active articulator, and the alveolar ridge, which is the passive articulator, so that the airflow coming from the lungs can leave the mouth cavity only when the obstruction is removed. You may not understand this without a diagram. Okay, so we'll be able to do that by next week, where we'll provide the diagram. And of course, you may not understand this again until you study the speech chain. So please go and download that. Now we have vowels as sounds. Okay, the consonants, they are usually an obstruction. Okay, there is direct contact between the tip of the tongue and the alveolar ridge. So generally we said they are produced with major obstructions in the mouth cavity. Now vowels. Vowels are sounds that are produced without such obstruction. For example, in the case of E, 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 there is a gap within the mouth that's determined by the position of the tongue, and the airflow can flow or escape relatively freely. So in the case of E, so of course, from the way it's pronounced, you can see that E, there's no obstruction, but there's an obstruction. All right. Then another difference between consonants and vowels is that vowels are generally voiced. Okay. Vowels are generally voiced. The vocal cords are set vibrating by the outgoing airflow. Consonants, by contrast, can be voiced or voiceless. Please mark that. Consonants can be voiced or voiceless. Now, the vocal cords are either far apart and do not vibrate, as in fan, fan, or they are relatively close and vibrate, as in burn, burn. Okay, you get to know all of this more. It's a practical thing. We try, that will be illustrated in the next class. Then we have voiceless and voiced sounds. That is in consonants. Could be either voiced or voiceless, while in vowels, vowels are voiced. Now, between consonants and vowels, there is a further classification. So we have classification of consonants. All right. I want to. We're going to wrap it up here with this. So you just listen. I'm talking down until our time is finally up. Then I'll see you next week. Now, factors relevant for the classification of consonants include the manner of articulation and the place of articulation and voicing. I'll take that again. Factors relevant for the classification of consonants include the manner of articulation, the place of articulation, and voicing. Now, with regard to the manner of articulation, English consonants can be classified into plosives, fricatives, affricates, how my time is up. All right. Okay. Thank you, students. That's where we're going to wrap it up today. So please don't forget your assignments, and don't forget that you have to do the practice every day. See you next week. Thank you.